Now that we've deployed SharePoint and set up our front end for our users to be able to connect to and actually start using it, it's time to turn our attention to figuring out what's going on behind the scenes, so that way we can maybe do a little bit of proactive monitoring and a little proactive performance maintenance. And so that's exactly what we're going to see in this lesson of monitoring SharePoint 2013. Now, what we're going to notice is that SharePoint gives us a couple of different tools right out of the box that we can use to see what's going on and be able to even have SharePoint tell us if something is potentially misconfigured. With that in mind, let's take a look at a little tool called the Health Analyzer. The Health Analyzer is essentially a scheduled best practices analyzer. Now, every now and then, when people hear Best Practices Analyzer, what they start to think in SharePoint is that there's a tool that's going to be able to look at their web applications, look at their site structure, and say, hey, you should really do this. If only that were possible. The catch, of course, with SharePoint is that there's a lot of different ways that you could configure it, and it really would be impossible to create a tool that could automate that process of setting everything up or telling you what it is that you've done wrong. So unfortunately, this isn't going to be able to do that. But what this is going to be able to do is take a look at how you've configured SharePoint at a higher level, take a look at some of the basic maintenance things that need to be taken care of behind the scenes, and let us know if something doesn't look quite right, or potentially fix the problem for us, which is pretty slick. Now, the way that this is done is by utilizing rule definitions. Each rule definition has a few different components. The first of which is going to be, well, the rule itself. It's going to have the schedule, how often it is that it's going to run. It's going to have the server that it's going to run on. Now, this could actually be one of two settings. This could either be all servers, meaning that the rule must be analyzed on every single server, or it could be any server, meaning that it's just simply going to run on one in the farm that's going to be able to examine and figure out whether or not everything works. And then last but not least is the option to automatically fix the problem. With that in mind, let's take a look at a couple of the different rule definitions that we have and how the Health Analyzer is going to let us know if something is wrong. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to head on over to Central Administration here. And what you're going to notice right away is that I get a little bar notification right up at the very top telling me that the Health Analyzer has detected some issues. And you'll notice that I've got a link right there that I could click on to go see what the problems are. Now, I'm going to get to that in a couple of moments, but let's start off by taking a look at the rules that we have. So I'm going to do this by clicking Monitoring, and then up on the top right, Review Rule Definitions. Now you'll notice that we've got a pretty good sized handful of different rule definitions for us. Let's take a look at a couple of them. First of all, you're going to notice the first little rule there, accounts used by application pools or service identities are in the local machine administrators group. Needless to say, whenever we're talking about security, it's all about least privilege. That everything that's going to be running, be it a service, be it a user, should have an account that has permissions to do what it needs to do and nothing else. So my service accounts shouldn't be in the administrators group. They don't need to be there. So you're going to notice, sure enough, we've got a rule for that. Now you'll notice the scope there, which is set to all servers. Again, the two options that I've got are all servers or any server. In this case here, you're going to notice this is set to run on every single server in the farm. The reasoning for that is because each server will actually have its own separate local administrators group. And so if we're going to determine whether or not the rule is being violated, we need to look at every single server in the farm. And so that's exactly what this is going to do for us. Now you'll notice the schedule there, and it's scheduled to run daily, and we could go in and reconfigure that maybe to run monthly or weekly or anything like that. Then you're going to notice whether or not it's enabled, and you'll also notice whether or not it's going to repair automatically. Now in theory, this could repair automatically. I mean, After all, the only thing that needs to be done here is it just simply needs to take the account out of the administrators group. But that could potentially cause a problem. Think about it. We've all been there. It's not something that a lot of us administrators like to admit to. But the fact of the matter is that every now and then, when we're fighting a problem and we think it might be a permissions issues, one of the things that we do is take the account that it's running under and either give it full control, throw it into the administrators group, throw it into sysadmins, etc. Just anything to make it work right now. And in theory, what we're going to do is go back and fix the problem. In reality, though, what happens more often than not is the administrator will forget about that and forget to go back and take the account out of the administrators group. So if this tool automatically took the account out of the administrators group, now all of a sudden SharePoint could cease to function on that server. So taking the account out of the administrators group would not be a completely safe operation for SharePoint, so it's not going to do it. Let's take a look at a different rule. Let me take a step back here, and under performance, you're going to notice that I've got databases used by SharePoint have fragmented indexes. Now, if we take a look at this one, what you're going to notice is that the scope is set to any server. The reason for that is because this is going to communicate with SQL and see what's going on inside of SQL. That really only needs to be done on one server in the farm. There's no need to run this on every single server in the farm. So it's not going to. So why is this rule important? Well, the reason that this rule is important is because SharePoint, at the end of the day, is a front end for SQL Server. The bulk of your user data is going to wind up inside of SQL. And we want to make sure that SharePoint can access this as fast as possible. And one of the biggest driving factors behind performance in SQL Server is indexes. And if our indexes are fragmented, meaning that our data is spread out across the disks, that's going to slow down SQL, and in turn, that's going to slow down SharePoint. Now, what you're going to notice here is that this is set to automatically repair. Why? Well, because this is something that SharePoint can do that's going to be completely safe. That it's not going to break anything if it goes in and defragments an index. So it can automatically handle that for us. Let's go in and see the current status of our health rules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to monitoring. I'm going to go to review problems and solutions. And then inside of here, you're going to notice that I've got a couple of issues. The first issue that I have down at the very bottom is that my drives are running low on free space. It's a development machine. I'm okay with that. But the other one that I want you to notice is the one where I have an account that is being used as a service account. In this case, it actually happens to be my farm account that is inside of the local administrators group. I want to fix that. The way that we're going to fix that is by going into computer management. So let's hit start. Computer management, and hit enter. And then what you're going to notice is if I go into my local users and groups, and I go into groups, there's my administrators, and there is my SP2013 farm. So let me go ahead and remove that and hit OK. And unfortunately, in order to truly remove it out of the group, I'm going to need to restart the system because our group membership, which is going to be refreshed periodically, is going to be forced to be refreshed if I restart the computer. Easiest way to do that, I always think, is just fire up PowerShell and type restart computer. And we'll hit enter, and we'll give that just a moment. So let me log back into my environment here, and once again, fire up Central Administration. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click View These Issues. I'm going to click back on our little accounts used by application pool services or in the local machine administrators group, and I'm going to click Reanalyze Now. Now, unfortunately, this is going to take just a moment to run and actually figure this out. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Close. And let me just hit refresh here. Aha! And you'll notice that sure enough, our little entry is gone. Cool. Our health analyzer is great for SharePoint telling us whenever it detects certain problems. But SharePoint's not going to be able to figure everything out. Partly because of the fact there could be a lot of different things potentially going wrong, and part of it could be that we're dealing with maybe a custom solution, maybe one that's created by a developer in-house, maybe one that's being put together by a third party. And what we need to do is we need to figure out what errors, what exceptions, what problems are being raised. And we're going to see that SharePoint will give us this information by using diagnostic logging, or what's sometimes known as ULS, or the Universal Logging System. Diagnostic logging is where our errors are going to be logged out to. So if you ever get an error message saying something went wrong, an unexpected error occurred, those types of things, all of that is going to wind up inside of diagnostic logging. Additionally, we can also do a bit of tracing as well with SharePoint by actually enabling a deeper level of logging on an application by application basis. Now, in order for us to set up our SharePoint logging, what we're going to do is we're going to choose the different categories to be logged out, and you'll notice that we'll be able to set different levels of logging for each category. Now, we'll be able to, depending on the event level, log out to either the Windows event log or to the SharePoint event log. Now, the thing about writing out to the Windows event log is that there's a lot of applications that will write out to the Windows event log. And so, as a result, what I could wind up doing is decreasing the signal to noise ratio. When I'm trying to track down a SharePoint problem, I don't want to have to fish through other Windows, SQL, or other errors. I just want to see the SharePoint ones. So generally speaking, I try and avoid writing out to the Windows event log, and instead focus my attention on the trace level, which is going to put it out to the SharePoint log. And then by using the SharePoint log, it becomes a bit easier for me to track down where the actual error has occurred. SharePoint also gives us this little thing called event flood protection. Let's imagine that we deployed out a web part. That web part needs to connect to a custom database, and that custom database, for one reason or another, has gone down. Well, this is, in pretty much every environment, going to then be the story. Is that my user's going to see that, and they're going to go, huh, that's kind of weird, and they're going to hit refresh. And they're going to hit refresh, and they're going to hit refresh. And then they're going to go to their CubeMate, and they're going to say, hey, Steve, this doesn't seem to be working. Can you give it a shot? And so Steve will go in, and Steve will try it a few times, and Steve is going to realize, oh, yeah, you know what? Doesn't look like it's working for me either. And then they're going to go to the person in the next cube over, and they're going to say, hey, Alice, could you go in and give it a shot? And so Alice is going to go in, and she's going to hit refresh. And now I've got 50, 60, 70 entries with the exact same error message. I really only need one. And this is where our event flood protection comes into play. Now, what will happen is SharePoint will detect, hey, we keep getting the exact same error message over and over and over again. So what it will do is it will put an entry into the log simply saying, hey, we're going to activate event flood protection. And it's going to show us what the error is, and then it's not going to log that error. And then once SharePoint detects, hey, that error hasn't happened in a little while, then it will go ahead and re-enable logging of that error, and it will again print that out to the log. Now, the last little thing that we're going to notice down at the very bottom is where we can write out the tracelog2 and our sizing. Now, you'll notice that our sizing can be configured by the number of days or even the total amount of disk space that we want it to be able to use. You're also going to notice that we have the option for the path as well. Now, one of the very interesting things about that screen is that the path has to exist on every single server in the farm. As a best practice, use a system variable. So then that way, on each server, I can go in and configure the system variable to be the location on that particular server that I want the logs to be written out to. Now, as far as reading the logs go, the logs will be written out to, by default, the 15 root, or sometimes known as the 15 hive, /logs, or to wherever directory it is that you decide to point it out to. Now, to help you out a little bit, there is an unsupported tool that's provided by Microsoft called the ULS Viewer that you can go download from that location right there. One of the other very big things that you're going to notice anytime that you get an error message is that if you go into the technical details, you're going to get what's known as a correlation ID. That correlation ID is a GUID that's generated for that error message. And so what I can do is I can go grab that GUID, or I can have my user tell me what the GUID was. I can use that to go off into the logs, go search inside of there, and find that error message. So it'll make it much easier for me to track down the error in question. Let's see how to configure our logging. I'm going to fire up Central Administration, and then I'm going to go under Monitoring, and then right over here, I've got Configure Diagnostic Logging. Now, what you're going to notice, first of all, is that we've got all of our different categories. So, for example, if I may be trying to track down something that's happening inside of a SharePoint site, then what I might decide to do is hit the little plus next to SharePoint Foundation and then see the different subcategories that I could then go in and start logging. Now, one of the very nice things that you're going to notice is that we've got two little columns for our event level and our trace level. So it will tell us where each item is currently set to as far as writing out to the event log and writing out to the trace log. Now, if you want to go in and configure any one of these, so let's say, for example, that my alerts aren't being sent. So I just want to see a little bit more information in the logs about my alerts. Then I could put a little check next to alerts, and then I'm going to scroll on down here, quite a ways to go there, and then now you're going to notice that I've got my least critical to write out to the event log, and my least critical to write out to the trace log. So maybe what I want to do is I want to be verbose there. So I just drop that down, hit verbose. Now what you're going to notice is that I've got my enable log flood protection. And let me keep scrolling on down here. You're going to notice where it is that I'm going to write that out to. And by default, again, that's going to be inside the 15 hive. So it'll actually be /program files, /Microsoft shared, /web server extensions, /15, /logs. You'll also notice the total number of days, and then you'll also notice the restrict trace log to a specific size. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click OK, and we'll give this just a second here. And now, let's say that we figured out what the problem was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Configure Diagnostic Logging, and what you'll notice is now something slightly different inside of here. You'll notice that my SharePoint Foundation is now bold. One of the challenges that we had in the past was that this little tool didn't tell us which ones it was that we had configured to something other than the default. And so let's say that I needed to do a little bit of troubleshooting, so I maybe made this verbose, I figured out what the problem is, and now I want to set it back to its default. Well, sure enough, you're going to notice, and this actually came along with SharePoint 2010, that anything that's not set to the default is bold. So what I could do is I could either hit the plus and then choose alerts, or I could actually just set the entire category. And then once again, scroll on down, and then I can simply choose reset to default, scroll all the way back down again, hit OK, and now if I go back into my diagnostic logging, you're going to notice that my SharePoint Foundation is now no longer bold. So typically that's the way that I want to do any deeper level tracing, is that I want to go in, set it to the level that I need for right now, go do my troubleshooting. Once I determine what the problem is, then I'll go back and reset it back to its default. One of the other things that we want to be able to see if we're going to be doing any form of performance tuning, is how SharePoint is running behind the scenes. And we can do this by enabling our usage and health data collection. Now, our usage and health data collection are based off of timer jobs. That basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and turn this on, and SharePoint will set up timer jobs that will then automatically start picking up all the data, putting it into a logging database, and then enabling reports that can then run off of that. Now, you are going to notice that we do have a couple of reports available through central administration. We've got our health reports and our usage reports. But one of the things that I do want to mention, and this is actually very different than a lot of other places inside of SharePoint, is that the logging database uses a published schema. Microsoft has made the schema for this available. So if you want to maybe create your own reports, you have the ability to do that. And you'll even notice that there are a lot of third-party vendors that have reports available to you as well. Now, if you want to use some of the reports that are built in, you do have that ability. Now, regardless of where you're going to get your reports from, you do need to enable this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our monitoring, go into configure our usage and health data collection, enable it, and then we'll be able to choose the different events that we actually want to monitor and set up our timer jobs as well by going into the timer jobs scheduling. And we can do this for our health data as well as for our usage logs as well. Now, down at the very bottom of this screen, what we're going to notice when we get into our demo here in just a moment, that we can choose where we want the database to be. And like I said, this is going to be based on an open schema, so you'll be able to run your own reports based off of this as well. Now, if you want to view the health reports, then what you're going to do is you're going to go into Central Administration, you're going to go to Monitoring, View Health Reports, and then from there, you'll actually be able to choose the web application that you want to run this against, choose the date range that you want to run this against, and then hit go, and SharePoint will go off and put together a report for you. Let's take a look at how we can configure our usage logging. So I'm going to go back in to Central Administration, and I'm going to go to Monitoring, and then I'm going to click Configure Usage and Health Data Collection. Now, this screen, for whatever reason, actually scrolls down just a little bit. If I do want my usage data collection, then I will need to put that little check up at the very top. And now what you're going to notice, I can choose all the different events that I want to be able to log. And what's great is that not only do I get higher level information, like, for example, my analytics usage, my app statistics, but I even get a lot of low-level items as well. So my file I/O, my SQL I/O, my SQL latency, etc. Now, if I keep scrolling down, you're going to notice that I can choose where I want the logs to be written out to for temporary purposes. So that'll write it out to, again, the 15 Hive and then my logs. And then you'll also notice that I can enable my health data collection. Now, if you want to configure when it's actually going to go collect all that data, then you can just simply open up the little scheduling window, and you can do that by clicking on the link. And the exact same thing holds true for my log collection. And then finally, down at the very bottom here, you're going to notice that I can choose where I want the database to be stored with all of this information. And then all I have to do is just simply hit OK. And then if we wait a couple of days, we'll have a little bit of data in there that we can go in and analyze. There's how to configure our monitoring, our logging, and take advantage of the Health Analyzer. I'll see you in the next lesson.